And now it's time. I said and now I said it's time. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something almost entirely, very precisely, but just not exclusively, sort of adjacently, kind of approximately, complete mesh enigma. And now for something completely mesh enigma.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, and related technologies. My name is Phil Rice, and I'm here with my co-hosts Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
And Damien Valentine.
Hello.
Ricky couldn't be with us this week. His emotional support parrot has scheduled a conflicting appointment for him, but he should be back with us next time around. So this week we're talking about my machinima pick for the month. And it's a little bit, I don't know why, but I've not typically been the one to gravitate towards or find the heavy realism emphasis picks, like Unreal Engine type stuff. But this time I managed to beat Tracy to it. So this film is called Rally. And the filmmaker's name, Santiago Mangini, I believe. Mangini. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. So this is a short film. I think the reason that it attracted me wasn't so much... It wasn't the realism per se that pulled me in. It was the method of storytelling, which is reliant a lot on body language and expression, and less dependent on dialogue. It's not a completely silent film, but it's an intriguing story that kind of, I think, falls into that pocket that we've talked about so many times on this show of there being an artful sense of ambiguity. Like, not all the details of this story are laid out plain. Not even the full context is really made plain by the film itself. There's a little bit of additional context that the description supplies, but this is basically a scenario. And what's outside those boundaries isn't really emphasized. And I think what's cool about that in this case is that it doesn't matter, or it didn't to me. It works as a kind of a self-contained story. It's a situation that is relatable enough, or recognizable enough, maybe is the better term, that it works. So, and then on top of that, it's visually pretty stunning. It's, I think, made with the intent to look very nearly photorealistic, and I think it succeeds at that. It's at nighttime. And so the use of color is very subdued. It's got this black and white type sheen to it in some of the shots. And essentially it's about these two smugglers who they're transporting someone to drop them off somewhere. That really is the whole story, really. I mean, essentially, that it's transporting somebody. It's when watching it, it's not immediately clear whether or not you get the impression that the person is being transported against their will. So, is this a kidnapping? Is it a rescue? And there's a lot of head scratching there at first, and it doesn't use any exposition tricks or narration or anything like that to cheat. It just throws you you're in the story. You're just in there, and here we go. And I found it very, very intriguing and very well made. and it's one of these that really makes Unreal Engine look good. It's not the first film to do so, of course, but it's one of those. So, what did you guys think of it?
Well, there's that bit at the beginning when the two smugglers are waiting for their passenger and they're listening to the radio and the news going on. And it's done in a way that makes you think, is that the person that has just been about to be loaded into their car? Or is it just something they're listening to? And it's never really confirmed one way or the other. So it's kind of left up to your imagination. And you don't know if this person is a good guy or not. And you don't know if who the smugglers are working for are the good guys or the bad guys. It's left completely up to your imagination. Um, I noticed that all the characters, the two smugglers and the other everyone else, you never really see their faces apart from the eyes of the two smugglers. And I think that helps with the realism because it's usually the faces that give away that it's animated. No matter how good the character model is, we're still not quite there yet at that perfect 3D character model that looks perfect human. We're getting close, but it's just something that's still slightly off.
Mhm.
So covering up the faces is a good way to hide that because you could very easily forget you're watching something animated and think this is a live action video that they've put a camera in a car and they've got these people driving around through the dark and you've got a night vision thing so you can see outside. Um, and like the external shots of the car as it's driving along, those could so easily be live action from the way this looks.
There were
Uh,
some moments where I wondered, Damien, if this wasn't some kind of hybrid,
mm.
because we've seen those before too, where there is some elements of this that are live or not. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Because those
agree.
external shots of the car driving through the trees and down those narrow roads, you think that must have taken a huge amount of effort to create that environment in Unreal. Because you're not just having a road, you've got to have the detail of the road. You've got the trees and all the grass and the lighting and
The
the car
lighting is
itself.
so great. Yeah.
Yeah. And the dirt that the car kicks up as it's going along the, the dirt road. Um, there's just so much detail in it that it gets to a point where it probably would be easier to go out and film a real car at night doing it.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell. But yeah, obviously a lot of work has gone into this, and I, I don't know what the background of the filmmaker is or anything like that, but um, it's one of those films where I want to see more, not necessarily this story. I think this story works as its own thing. You don't need to know
Hmm.
the answers. It's best left as a mystery. But I'd like to see this creator, San Diego, do more stories, more films. Not necessarily about these characters, but just, I don't know if he has done more. I hope he has. I need to look up to see if he has. Um, but he's obviously got real talent, and it's nice to see that. And he put the Unreal Engine to really good use. So let's see more of it, please.
Mm. I've got some background I can
Okay.
tell you, which
Ah, good.
will maybe shed some insight into this. You know what? When I looked at this, I thought, my God, this is really impressive. And like you, I was thinking, is that real? Or is that actual animation? I don't know. So it kind of, it led me down two sort of paths of inquiry. I think it's both technically excellent, but actually what shines through is the quality of the storytelling. And so I started with the storytelling angle and I looked the director up. And actually, he is an established filmmaker, having won awards for quite a few live action shorts, um, which I'll put a link to. Nothing really particularly resonates with me in terms of whether I've seen it or not. One is actually on Netflix. But the genre he works quite a lot with is suspense and horror. And one of his films, No One Gets Out Alive, is on Netflix as a live action. So he's
Hmm.
not without chops in filmmaking. Most of these films use very little dialogue, as I understand, which is clearly an approach that he's taken to this Unreal work as well. Now, interestingly, I found an interview with him talking about this film, on the VFX process channel, which I'll also put a link to, and you can sort of hear what he's got to say about it. What's very evident from that is that it was the Unreal toolset, particularly metahumans, that helped him deliver this film. Apparently, he had originally written the script for, basically for a live action film a number of years ago, but then struggled to get funding and decided to go a different route with it. And that sort of coincided with him being caught up in the pandemic restrictions, which, when, like so many others, is when he first sort of invested the time to take a proper look at Unreal Engine. So this, I think, is a film that's been a long time coming. Definitely not as quick as some of the films that we tend to review on this channel in terms of its production. I think it took him about a year and a half in the making of it with Unreal, of which at least half a year was him learning how to use Unreal. And that's because this guy had no prior experience of doing animation, let alone character animation experience. And that's why he used the concept of a face covering, this sort of night vision helmet, to cover up the fact that he actually really wasn't too sure how to do the facial animations for this, which is great.
It's a clever trick.
It's a real clever trick, and one that we've kind of seen done before when, so for example, Martin Bell on Prassenberg Ridge, when he hadn't used a tool like that before, applied a sort of filter over it as a way of getting around the fact that his animation wasn't as he would have liked to have seen it. And this guy's done something not dissimilar within the tool set. So I guess really I was a little intrigued by some of the comments that he was making in this interview, because he's clearly a very experienced filmmaker. But what he's done with it, and to some of the points that you guys were making actually, is he's basically tried to use his filmmaking techniques and cinematography type techniques and apply them into Unreal. Literally, as thinking about how he would do live action, filmmaking in order to create animated scenes. Now, that's interesting because we've often commented that, when you use a 3D engine, you're not restricted to the same physics limitations or physical limitations that you might be as you would if you were to use, if you were to do live action. But this guy deliberately constrained what he was doing by the physics of what you would do if you were a live action filmmaker.
Maybe that helps with the realism as well.
Maybe.
When you're watching a live
Has to
action
be
film,
innate of it,
you expect the camera to behave in certain ways.
Yes.
Whereas it's animated, you can do all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, he's deliberately taken that approach to this. And I suspect it's because he doesn't really know any other way. He doesn't understand that you can use, virtual cameras from any angle and that kind of stuff. In the same, it's a comment we've made many times actually about machinima creators often have a unique angle, but real live action guys just never see it in that way. And I think this is a typical example of that. Didn't attempt any of it. His aim really was just to create as near a realistic film as possible, which in some ways, when I heard him say that, I was a little disappointed, because of the perspective that we have when we talk about machinima generally on this show. But having said that, his general approach to short stories is that it's all about iteration in the development stages and then sharing and community, which is a little bit different to live action. So I think in terms of his process and the way that he made it and the way that he improved it as he was developing it over this sort of extended period of time is really highly commendable, because he wants it out there. He wants people to comment on it. And he didn't expect it to be a perfect finished article when he put it out there. Because he was using it primarily as a tool to test ideas. And that really was his main rationale for attempting to do the film in Unreal in the first place, because he was thinking about how can this tool, during lockdown, of course, how can this tool help him with previs for his live actions, like we were talking about the Predator thing. He had this sort of previs mindset with how he wanted to use the tool. Including, for example, things like lighting positions. That said, that was his original reason for learning it. But of course, like many others, once he got into it, he could really begin to see the potential of it, and the workflow sort of came to him. Although, in fact, in this, he didn't use any mocap at all. But he can really, his comments were along the lines of he can really see the potential of how other tools and techniques can be integrated into the workflow to improve the realism of the way actors move, for example. So, he started out with one thing in mind and ended up, I think, with an entirely different product, which is really quite an impressive little short. So impressive, in fact, that it was an official selection at Fantasia 2024, Canadian Film Festival. And also, I think it's worth mentioning here that, because he's a filmmaker with chops and whatnot, he's got this approach to, well, I'm going to actually have an original soundtrack with this, which I think, by the way, that soundtrack was created by a guy called Theo Porset, along with sound design, which he created with a few others. But I think it's worth saying that it is the sound design and the soundtrack that actually really makes this work. Because I think without the sound design, the story would be really much harder to tell. That's particularly, for example, in delivering some of the emotional depths that it seems to have. So, for example, in the interview, he talks about sound making animation easier to do for him, because he found that if there was a sound like the heartbeat example and the window wipers on the car and whatnot, because that sound was there, he didn't have to animate something that would convey that sort of sense of tension. So it made, a good, working with a good quality sound designer through the process as part of the creative process is what helped him, make this animation as he was going along, which I think is we've said that before about the importance of, one thing being integrated with the other rather than sort of leading with one thing. Like, for example, when we talked about Arthur, I think the music was what led how that film was put together. But for other films that we've talked about in the past, you can Dune was an example that you talked about, Phil, ages ago, where the music was an integral part of the way that film was produced. It's very evident in this. And I think it's a really smart way to actually overcome some of the limitations that you might have when you're technically not as savvy as you might want to be with a tool set. What makes this, I think, also technically impressive, of course, is the editing. Now he's using Unreal to illustrate such tiny details, with a focus on these two central characters, these car drivers wearing this night vision helmets and navigating through this kind of dark forest to some sort of border crossing point. And by the way, he's used Resolve to add filters and masks like the rain and the dust and the mist effects. So they're not actually done in the engine at all. They're done in post. And I think it's these kind of little details on the windshield, as well as the lighting on their faces. And, also their eyes and the emotion that's evident in the eyes that are really quite impressive. Um, and then the cityscape on the other side of the border crossing, that's also a level of detail that I think, sort of watching from the first it's a film of two halves. We often talk about film of two halves. This definitely is a film of two halves. That sort of city on the other side of the border is a level of detail that I think is a little unexpected, um, given that the earlier part is this intense focus on these characters, which kind of led me to think, well, actually, then it's the shots that he's used that are really quite intriguing here. The first half are primarily close-ups, real close-ups, real sort of, on that bit of the face kind of thing.
Right.
Where they're, the character is in the cockpit of the car. But then once you get to the border and then over the border, they're mostly long shots, not exclusively, but they are mostly shots taken at a distance where you can't even see any detail of, any kind of emotion, not even through the way that the characters are really moving, because you're just too far away. Which makes you lose the sense of the personal. And I guess it's an approach, when I was thinking about it, to ending the story. As you've got, because the story arc is so intense, he seems to have used the second part, this sort of cityscape and the withdrawal from the personal, as a kind of way of closing out the story. And which then made me sort of think, well, actually, that would be my only real criticism then, because it took too long to close out the film if it was entirely done with those kind of long shots. At least I say that, given the overall length of the film, where there was such intensity and clearly in the first half, but such distance in the second half. Why make it so long when really what you wanted it to be was the intensity of the personalities? So yeah, I mean the using the focus to draw attention, I think was the most impressive bit. It's what draws you in as a viewer to the story. I think for me, when I was watching this, it's the proximity that you have as the viewer to these two drivers. I mean, you feel that you're in the vehicle with them.
Yeah, it's very intimate.
It's really, yeah, you feel, gosh, this car's crammed with people, isn't it? You've got the two guys in the front and God knows who in the back, and you're in the back seat, between them, and that sort of intensity, it makes you question, well, what's going on here? You don't know what's going on. You don't know who these people are. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they're going. You don't know anything. There's a lot of information that is just not explained at all. And that's quickly followed by, you know what? I actually don't think these are bad people necessarily. And that's despite the description, which actually I didn't really think matched closely enough what was going on in the film. Although it's pretty evident they're embroiled in something slightly nefarious, but I didn't get a real bad vibe about these things. What I did get was this incredible claustrophobic sensation that you're just part of it, which was kind of interesting. And part of that is also the way you're bouncing around. The car's bouncing around, the characters are sort of bouncing around.
It's like the camera.
Yeah, as you're driving.
So the camera's moving in a way that feels natural for the car and not really over the top, but not static either. That's hard to get right.
Yeah, well, okay, so he explains that he's done a second level of movement. So the car's doing one thing, and he's allowed the physics of the characters to sort of move in a little more exaggerated way. So it's a layered effect in terms of the camera movement, which I think is brilliantly well done. But in the end, I felt quite dizzy from it. And then, there are other shots where you're actually tailing the car and you're really far too close for comfort as you sort of follow it through. I think it's rare that you can actually say this. But what I also enjoyed about this was what the director left out of the main scenes. Um, because you got the sense of, you know, this character being bungled into the boot of the car, you're not sure if he's a hostage or, like you said, Phil, he's somebody that's being rescued or whatever. You're not really sure. Um, you don't know what the reason is that they're going through the forest. Why be transported in this way? Or indeed why you would want to navigate through the forest like a rally driver in the first place. And what's the point of this border point? Why does that exist where it does when there's nothing else around? It's just there in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing that explains any of that. And then another aspect I thought that was a little bit disturbing actually was the way the body of the co-driver that doesn't make it through the border crossing is dragged out of the car and left under the bridge. Why would the driver need to do that? So, you guys nailed it in terms of, what Ricky always was always called with us is the ambiguity. It's the ambiguity that actually makes this so interesting. It's not so much the content of it, but it's the thought process you go through as you watch it about what's not said or what's not portrayed. And it makes it very consuming because of that. And yes, there are probably some technical things that don't quite work so well, like the eyes, I thought just lacked a little bit of fidelity. Because I've seen, much more realistic metahuman eyes than what we saw in this, I think. Then I
Are you
think
talking on the eyes? Are you talking about the actual design of
the
the eye or the movement?
yeah, the eye, the movement, and also the lens.
Yeah.
Because you were so intense on that, but it didn't really matter. I mean, I'm just nitpicking, really, I suppose. The other thing that I thought was maybe a technical detail that didn't follow through was, there was the skin of the drivers appeared to vary a little bit at different points in the film. I thought the blood looked a bit plasticky.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Uh,
blood wasn't the strongest, that's for sure.
it just didn't. Yeah, you kind of lost the sense of realism at that point, and the clothes were just too clean, really, for driving through a filthy forest in the dead of night with a God knows who in the back. But you know what? For 9 minutes, it was a really thought-provoking story. So did I really care about those kind of details? Not really. I just thought it worked really well. I think it's a great short. It's far more than a technical demo, but it did raise a lot of questions. Um, I'm not sure I'd necessarily want to see an episode two because I think it, like Damien says, I think it stands alone. The only thing you might want to see is closing out some of the ambiguous elements, the questions that it raised. But I didn't get that wedded to it to really want to know more. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess, an explanation of why it's called Rally and not something like Transport or Escape or something might be nice to know. But a really, really interesting pick. Fascinating to sort of go through it. Fascinating to hear about the director's approach to it. And really interesting in terms of what he's managed to achieve with it. So yeah, great pick.
Yeah, I found myself fixating on the eye movement in particular, and I think it's because um,
It's a dead eye, right?
well, on my own channel, I've been doing a couple series. I'm in the middle of a second series now where there's a lot of face work.
Mhm.
It's really just dialogue and two characters moving, and I'm doing digital puppeteering for these different parts of the face, and the eyes are one of the hardest parts.
Mm.
And it's an aspect of eye movement that I never really thought much about until having to try and puppeteer it. But it's the fact that, you know, eyes, and he did this in this movie as well, that there's points where the eyes of the character gradually move from like center to left or from center to right. But our eyes don't really work that way.
No, they don't. That's right.
Unless you're following something with your eyes, then you can easily gradually move them. But if you ever just tried to, without fixating on an object, to gradually, your eyes don't work that way. They do what are called saccades, I think is what the term is,
That's right.
where it's basically instant darting and like that. And very often in the middle of a blink is when those are happening, right? And
But
to get those,
it's not quite instant. There's a
right.
little delay, but you get that slightly wrong and it looks off because I've played around with this so much as well.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's a fun challenge to mess with. Yeah.
Yeah.
I question your idea of fun when you say that.
Well, learning is fun for me. So it's like, I know that on some of the ones, the episodes that I've put out, that first of all, I know I'm getting better at it as I go, but I also know I'm still not getting that part right. It's maybe fun's not the right word. You're right. Maybe it's more of I'm gaining an appreciation for,
Yeah.
and also trying to think in terms of problem solving for that. Like, how could I do that differently to where the eye movement would be more,
Yeah.
even though I'm not going for a realistic aesthetic at all, it still throws you off when, and maybe you don't even know why.
Yeah.
But when you see an eye move in a way that human eyes don't move, we spend a lot of time looking at other people's eyes.
We do.
You know,
Yeah.
it tells you a lot about the person and about the interaction you're having, where they're looking and what they're. I mean, we read so much information off of that.
Yeah.
So we are all very, very well studied on eye movement, even if we don't articulate it. We all instinctively, or it's a grown into instinct. I think even infants have it to a degree. They can tell a lot from the eyes, and they read a lot of information there. So that's a detail of it that I really fixated on, of watching the way that he executed it and thinking about the way I've tried to. It's hard
But you know
stuff.
what? You know what I did? I ended up, because believe it or not, I'm an eye tracking expert.
Are you really?
I am really.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. But because that annoyed me a little, not annoyed me, but because that detail just wasn't there. Not that I was expecting it to be there.
Right.
The bit that I ended up focusing on wasn't the eyes, but the eyebrows.
Oh, yeah?
Because the eyebrows are quite good. I thought,
Okay.
not in a muscle movement sort of way, but the detail was quite intriguing.
Sure.
So yeah, interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, all of that said, these are minute, tiny little points, but
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think
know-
about what that says about the film, that's what we're, those are the details that
Yeah.
we decided to scrutinize, right?
what an achievement though for somebody that's never actually animated from zero to this. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah,
That's
It's very impressive.
yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant.
All right. Well, that's our pick for this week. What are your thoughts, listeners/watchers? Why don't you drop us a line at talk@completely.machinima.com, or if you've got recommendations for us for other stuff that we should watch, feel free to shoot them over to us. Even if it's your own film, you can do that. That's not against the rules at all. You can also leave us a comment wherever you see this video or wherever you're hearing this podcast. We read them all. Good and bad and the ugly, we read them all. So yeah, let us know what you think. So that's it for this week. On behalf of my co-hosts, Tracy Harwood and Damien Valentine, I'm Phil Rice. Ricky Grove, blame his parrot. He's not here, but he'll be back with us soon. Have a great day.
Bye bye.
Bye.